So our next speaker is Dr. John Mitchell, who's an assistant professor in psychiatry and behavioral sciences, and he will talk to us about development of mobile contingency management intervention for PrEP adherence among young Black men who have sex with men. Thank you.
Great, thanks for having me. And so for this talk, we're going to be talking about a mobile health app that we developed. And this came out of some research that I was doing on mobile health and substance use. And then I found out about PrEP, and that was kind of my foray into this. So I want to start off just with some acknowledgments for collaborators on this project. So at Duke, UNC, NCA&T, and then also Intelligent Automation, Inc. In particular, co-PI on this project, Lance Okeke. Some disclosures are listed here, and then also I wanted to acknowledge funding for this study was provided by a CFAR supplement grant. And so in terms of background, as we know, PrEP effectiveness is strongly associated with PrEP adherence. And the earlier PrEP trials showed a pretty wide variety in terms of rates of adherence, 12 to 82%. And although adherence may be higher than in these initial trials, there's still a need for interventions to improve adherence, particularly calls for those that are facilitated by technology or some form of feedback on adherence. And so in terms of who we should target then with these interventions, we know that MSM are at high risk for HIV, particularly Black MSM. For example, 38% of new HIV infections in the US in 2016 were among Black MSM, which was higher than among Latino and white MSM. And at the current rates, Black MSM have a 50% chance of HIV infection in their lifetime, particularly if they're younger. Therefore, younger Black MSM is the kind of group that we want to target. And then also they're in greater need of help with adherence. So for example, we see that younger age among Black MSM is associated with decreased likelihood of PrEP adherence. And so a couple of years ago, we adapted our app for PrEP. And we tested it in a small pilot trial. So the app itself is called mSmart. So we piloted this among 10 young MSM. And I'll talk more about the app itself as an intervention for adherence. But basically what we found in this study was good results in terms of feasibility and acceptability, promising preliminary efficacy in this small sample with 30% improving on a biomarker of Truvada. However, this sample was predominantly white, and this is also an earlier iteration of the app. So our primary aim for this study was to refine mSmart based on our original pilot work and pilot it among young Black MSM, and then also add in a different kind of contingency management technique, which I'll talk about. So this was an open label phase 1 trial of young Black MSM already prescribed PrEP in the community. And so this is what our sample looked like, about 25 years old, ranging from 21 to 29. Months on PrEP ranged from a couple of days to almost 2 years, but the average was about a year on PrEP. And this was a pretty well-educated and mostly full-time or part-time employed sample. And so in terms of the intervention itself, it includes multiple features, but the one I want to focus on, and the one that we think is the active ingredient here, is contingency management. So contingency management is a behavioral intervention that uses systematic reinforcement dependent on the occurrence of a specific behavior. So in this case, earning money for logging a dose of Truvada in mSmart. And so we chose contingency management because it's been shown to be successfully improve adherence among people using antiretrovirals among individuals who are HIV positive or HIV exposed. And so the contingency management technique that we adopted in this study was called the Fishbowl technique. So this is different from our previous trials. So the Fishbowl technique has been shown to be a lower cost contingency management procedure than traditional contingency management. And so the way that we used it in this study is that every single time you logged a dose, then you earn a virtual scratch-off ticket, which I'll show in the next couple of slides. And at the end of the week, you get to do all of your scratch-offs. And so with each scratch-off, you get the same probability of winning a certain amount. So each scratch-off is the exact same each time. So that is, with every ticket or scratch-off you get, you have a 65.5% chance of earning nothing but some positive verbal feedback. Way to go, keep it up, was kind of a generic message that we used. A 26.7% chance of earning $1, all the way up to the big prize of $100 for one scratch-off, and you had a 0.2% chance of earning that for each one. So if you're using the app, you're told that the range of money that you can earn, which sounds pretty appealing and more engaging, even though in reality, it's pretty low cost and the chances of winning this big prize is low. And so here's what the app looks like. So it has 6 different features or widgets, and they're all listed here. And we're going to focus on one in particular that has the contingency management piece, which is the medication aid widget. So app users get a once-a-day reminder to take their Truvada, which is a time that they set up themselves in the app. And when they open up the app, they have an indicator light here saying that they need to go into this widget and log a dose. And then it takes them to this screen. So it either indicates that they want to take their dose right now, or that they have already taken it and they can enter it in retrospectively. If they click on they want to take their dose right now, then it brings up this screen, which is a picture of Truvada. And so what they do is they click on the pill itself, and then it automatically opens up their camera, and it takes a picture of their camera. And this just takes a couple of seconds. You don't have to manually do it. You just press the button on the screen. You're not actually taking a picture like you usually would on your phone. It's a lot easier than that. And so at the end of each 7-day period, participants get to perform their scratch-offs. And so this is what it looks like. So you click on play the scratch-off game here, and then they get this popping up, and then they do a virtual scratch-off. And so you wipe it with your finger, and then you see how much you win. And so, then so whenever they do this, we had a website where we could track this on the back end, and it can track the data in real time, so that we knew when people were doing their scratch-offs, and we'd go in, and once we saw how much money that they earned, we'd send them an Amazon gift card to their email address, so that they would get that reinforcer as quickly as possible, which is really important in contingency management. And then the app has other features as well that I'm not really going to focus on that much, but just kind of to broadly go over. Let's see, so it has this smart desk, and so this is a feature that asks questions about PrEP knowledge and HIV knowledge and general medication adherence difficulties. Based on your responses to that, then the app prioritizes a list of behavioral adherence strategies, ways to improve adherence in general. It has coping strategies, which helps people with coping with side effects to the medication. Here you can set the time for your reminders, and then treatment progress, you can track your overall adherence with the app. And so this study involved 2 visits, so a pre-treatment baseline and a post-treatment follow-up. And these visits were separated by 8 weeks of using MSmart. And over that time period, we did weekly phone calls with the participants to go over any technical difficulties that they were having with the app, so we could track that. So in terms of feasibility, we looked at MSmart functioning issues. So out of our 15 subjects, at least 9 had one issue, and then I listed what those were here. They were relatively minor. The app didn't crash or anything like that, but sometimes there were connectivity issues that developed, delays in receiving the scratch-offs, but things that we were able to fix pretty quickly. Another thing that we considered for feasibility was rates of logging a dose daily in MSmart. So on the x-axis is each subject, and on the y-axis is their overall adherence of logging a dose in the app. And so the average rate across the entire sample was 82%, indicated by this black horizontal line. So 82% of the time they're logging a dose each day. And you can see that across the subjects there is some variability, but in general the overall rates were pretty good. We had all but one subject open up the app and do this one particular widget at least 50% of the time. When we looked at acceptability, at the post-treatment visit, we had participants respond to questions about the app and rated it on a 1 to 4 scale. You can see that participants were asked about overall satisfaction, 3.38, so that's in the moderate to extreme acceptability range. When we looked at things like usability, if they would recommend MSmart to others who are taking Truvada, user-friendliness, would they use it if they were just starting to take Truvada? We had favorable ratings. And then also, how difficult was it to learn to use MSmart? We had low ratings, so a low score is really good here, indicating that this was an easy app to learn. Another measure of acceptability, we use the system usability scale. And so this is looking at each subject on the x-axis and their system usability scale score on the y-axis. And higher score indicates greater acceptability. And in order to interpret these results, we used this is kind of the standard threshold used for this measure. And we had 11 out of 15 participants score above this threshold of 68. And when we looked at the average for the whole sample, the average score was 72. So we had good findings in terms of acceptability. What about impact on adherence itself? So we also looked at changes for a biomarker of PrEP, of Truvada, from pre and post. And so we collected blood samples, and we used the methods that have been developed at UNC to look at this with Angela Kashuba, who had worked on this project as well. So scores on the y-axis, so a 0 indicates low or no dose of the drug, a 5 indicates daily adherence, and so a 4 or a 5 is considered a therapeutic level of adherence among MSM. And you can see here that the average score at pre-treatment was 3.6. So we already had a group that was pretty adherent from the front end, so which kind of made us a little nervous because there's really not much room to improve. But scores did increase to 4.6 on average for the sample, and we were underpowered. This was a small sample, but when we looked at effect size with Cohen's d, we got a medium effect size. So in conclusion, this is the first study to apply a low-cost contingency management approach for PrEP. And we see that MSmart is feasible, it's acceptable among young Black MSM. However, there's also room for improvement. We're currently in the process right now of qualitatively analyzing some interviews that we did, exit interviews. And then also we have promising preliminary efficacy data, but we really need to test this in a large trial against an active treatment comparison. I think the pro of this is that this is an intervention that we can administer remotely. You can disseminate it widely. You can do it with high fidelity since a lot of it is automated. And so if you're a provider, there's not much interaction that you actually have to do with the app. So it's a work in progress, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. That was really interesting. Can you make some comments on how you would apply that to other populations and other geographic regions, what you would have to do to look at acceptability in different countries around the world?
Oh, okay. Yeah, in different countries around the world. I was going to say, if it's in the U.S., I have, I know what we would do. We would do a very similar design if we were doing substance use. To look at that within, I think you'd really have to look at cultural factors and really make that a driving factor when you adapt that. Because we did a lot of adaptation just from going from one kind of population to the other for this project, going from substance users to people on PrEP. There was a lot that we had to change in that process. So yeah, I can imagine, going across borders, there's going to be a lot of work in that adaptation.
Questions?
So thank you for that presentation. I'm over here. So I remember reading years ago that if you start paying people to do something that they were already doing, once you take the payment away, they may stop doing what they were previously doing because they lost that reinforcement. So have you looked at, especially your adherent ones to start with, did after you stopped paying them, was there a sort of a rebound where they said, well, forget this, if I'm not going to get my lottery tickets, I'm not going to do this anymore? And how much do you worry about that as you build this app?
Yeah, that's a great point. And kind of the general logic, which I agree with, is that if you have an extrinsic reinforcer, you're probably going to be less likely to develop that intrinsic kind of motivation to do it. To answer your question, what happened to the people after they finished the study? We're not sure because we didn't follow up with them. They came for that last visit and then they were gone. I would guess, since this was a sample that was already pretty well off in terms of adherence, that we didn't lose much. But what I would really like to do with this is to get this on individuals who are just starting off on Truvada. and help them get going with adherence and then stick with it over time. And then I think that issue becomes particularly relevant. And so there's been other work done with contingency management where you kind of start off high in contingency management and the extrinsic reinforcers on the front end, and then you phase that out and you do some work on the back end with using things like cognitive behavioral approaches or motivational interviewing to increase that intrinsic reinforcement side.
And just one other comment. You had a very well-educated, sound like relatively stable group. So what I meet are the 17 to 18-year-olds. And so I would be particularly interested in you studying this in some of the younger individuals.
Yes, I totally agree. I feel the same way. Thank you.
Great. Thank you again.